Hello, people. I am now the host. 19 people out of 20. Boy, it's getting scarcer and scarcer around here. Let me see all your faces real quick just so I can feel like there are people here. There's Willie Corley. Yay. Carrie Murphy. Corstone. Natasha. Celine Ramos. I can always count on Celine. Zach Ogden from Ogdensburg. Christie's here. Julia Youssef. Angelina Peltke. Stefan McCain. Hey, Stefan. Welcome. Okay, guys. Good news. We're going to be doing pot today, which we can joke about now. It's legal in Vermont. I could sit here and like smoke it in front of you, and they couldn't do anything about it. Actually, I'd probably lose my job, but in Vermont, they couldn't do anything about it. Legal. Natasha, you're from India, am I correct? So an Indian friend of mine told me that cannabis is pretty common in India. Is that true? Part of certain religious days or something, or no?
I don't think so.
No,
It's not where I'm from.
Okay, well, I'll have to ask. Do you know Dr. Rao from Communications?
Mm,
No. I think she says she is Bengali. Is that right? Yeah.
okay.
Is that from where you are, near you, or no?
I think that's Bangladesh, but I'm not.
Near
Yeah,
Bangladesh.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She's definitely from India, but I think her family is from there. So I'll have to ask her about the cannabis connection. Mm-hmm. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started with this? I'm not sure. Again, it's like, I go through these lectures really, really fast in this class because I'm just kind of like talking, not writing on the board or anything, but we'll see what we can do to make this last, make it worth your while, as it were. So with no more ado, as they say, ado. Bringing my notes up too, so I know what I'm talking about. Setting up my screen. Cannabis. So you all know that's the cover of the book. Big old fat bud cannabis plant. And so, start out with history. As you're probably aware, cannabis has been used for 5,000 years. They find residue, hemp residue in Egyptian mummies and other places that. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to move something here. So, pretty much whenever they dig up something old and it's got residue in it, it's always got some THC in it, especially like in Egypt and Asia and places like that. It's been used for pretty much ever. And before the 1937 in this country, you could just go to the pharmacy and buy it. I love these cough medicines. Here's a cough medicine that is cannabis indica, chloroform, and alcohol. This one's cannabis, chloroform, morphine, and a bunch of other things. So, the thing about these cough syrups is if you drink enough of it, you will never cough again. That's guaranteed. It's the last time you'll have a cough. And here's another thing you can get in the pharmacy at one point. So this was all legal until 1937 when a guy came into the government named Harry Anslinger. Harry Anslinger was a raging racist, and he was against marijuana because it was, the blacks and the Mexicans who were smoking it, so he wanted to get rid of it because of that. So you can read, these are direct quotes of Harry Anslinger, which, I mean, today they would just crucify him for saying this, but back then you could get away with it. Reefer makes the darkies think they're as good as white men. Yes, well, maybe they are. I don't know compared to you. So anyway, because of this and his attitude, it was made illegal, sort of. What they really did was they made it that you couldn't have it without a special stamp. See, they couldn't make it totally illegal because it was still important for making of rope. Um, the fibers of the hemp plant are really good for making rope. So, going into World War II, you didn't want to be lacking of any, you didn't want to get into a situation where nobody was growing it because you needed it for rope. Um, so they made it so you had to have this special stamp, and they didn't give these stamps to too many people. And then in 71, then again, another kind of racist law. Richard Nixon wanted to stick it to the hippies and the darkies. So he made it a Schedule 1 drug. So when it comes to the FDA, you can have Schedule 1, 2, 3, and 4. So Schedule 4 drugs are over the counter. You can buy them, just go in the pharmacy and buy them. 3, there's less restriction. 2 are pretty restricted, but 3 and 2, you need a prescription to get. So 3 would be like, stomach medications or something like that you can only get from the doctor. And then Schedule 2 would be more dangerous drugs that you can get from the doctor, like opiates and probably antidepressants are in there or something. But then Schedule 1 are drugs that are supposedly so dangerous that you can't, even doctors can't prescribe them. They can't be used therapeutically at all. And it's really hard to use them experimentally as well. So basically, from 1971 until very recently, there was no research done with cannabis, or very little research done with cannabis until I would say the 90s. So 20 years of research was shot because of this law. Cannabinoids, what are we talking about? So cannabinoid basically just means a structure of chemical that comes from the cannabis plant. And the basic structure is this heterocyclic ring structure here. Not heterocyclic, but it's got an oxygen there. So you've got 3 different rings here, and then constituents coming off of it. So the plant makes a lot of different ones of different chemicals like this, and it stores them in different structures. The main one that people are interested in for recreational use is THC. So there's no THC in the actual plant. In the plant, it comes as this THCA, which has got this carboxylic acid group over here. Now this group will come off with heat. So when you heat the plant, this comes off and then it becomes THC. Another important one is 11-hydroxy-THC. So this is delta-9 THC. This is 11-hydroxy-THC because this methyl group here has been oxidized to put an alcohol group on it. So this will be converted into this by the liver. Now 11-hydroxy-THC is even more potent than delta-9 THC. So this is still an active compound. And then you've got this guy here, carboxy-THC, which is just you oxidize that methyl group one more time. Of course, it's an alcohol group now. And when you do that, you end up with an acid over here. Now, because it's an acid, it becomes polar, and now that can't get through the blood-brain barrier. So this is inactive. And this is what gets excreted through the kidneys. So when they're doing a urine test for THC, they're really looking for carboxy-THC. And then down the bottom here, we've got CBD, which you can buy anywhere now. It seems like it's everywhere. And if you read up about THC, you'll find out that it does everything. It cures every possible problem. How do we stay alive up to now without CBD? Because it's such a miracle drug. I would be very careful about believing a lot of what people say about CBD. It does have some important actions, but they'll say it does everything, and just to try and sell it, because it's over the counter. Basically, you can buy it anywhere. So the difference here is you've broken that ring by oxidizing this carbon here. So you've opened it up. Now CBD. Well, we'll talk about receptors later and about CBD and what it can and can't do. Okay, so what you really need to know here is THC 11-hydroxy, actually all of these things. I don't expect you to memorize the structure, but you should know the names and how these chemicals differ from each other. Where does it come from? It is a natural product. 3 different species of cannabis plant. You got your sativa, you got your indica, you got your ruderalis. So sativa is very tall, big bushy plants. These are short and bushier indica plants, and ruderalis are kind of wimpy little plants. Now the ruderalis doesn't have a lot of THC in it, so it's not really cultivated. But it's hardier. It grows in northern climates, more northern climates, and sometimes people will try to cross it with some of these other ones to get an indica that's more hardy in northern climates. But in the end, when people are making it for recreational use, it's the indica or the sativa that they're growing. And by crossbreeding, they can change the percentage of THC and CBD and all the other cannabinoids in the plant. So there's a lot of selective breeding that happens with this in order to do that. Available forms, basically 3 available forms. This is typically how people buy it, which is just the bud of the plant. Now, back in the day, if you were to buy a nickel bag of marijuana, a nickel bag was a 1/4 ounce of marijuana, and it was $5. That's why they called it a nickel bag. 1/4 ounce today will probably cost you, $80 or something. But back in the day, it was $5 for a 1/4 ounce. And when you got your pot back then, it would have everything in it. You'd have leaves ground up with some stems and some buds, and you'd have seeds in there. It was like it was like everything. And you would have to take that and take the stems and seeds out before you cooked it. Before you used it. But today it's like I guess it was late 70s, they started coming up with this sensimilla. So sensimilla is a Spanish word for without seeds. So the cannabis plant is dioecious, which means it's got male and female parts, or male and female plants. You know how some plants will have them both together in the flower, where you got the pistil and the stamen, pistil being female and the stamens being male. With this plant, they're separate plants. And so what they figured out was if you get rid of the males, then the females get excited, and they make more and more THC, and they get these really thick, ripe buds that, and they never get seeds because you don't have any males around to fertilize them. So typically what you get today is just that. They just get rid of the males early on, and then you just get seedless buds. And if you look at these buds, this frosting on these buds, you can see little white frosting all over it. That's the trichomes. And the trichome is a little structure that the plant makes. I have no idea why, because I'm not a botanist, but they make these little structures, and this is where the THC is concentrated, out here in these little things here. So what you can do is take this guy and just rub it between your fingers and smear those trichomes and get it off, and then you'll have goo on your fingers, and that goo is hash. So hash is a concentrated form of THC, or concentrated form of cannabis. It's got a lot of different chemicals in there, but it's got a high concentration of THC because the THC was concentrated in these trichomes, and now you've pulled those trichomes off, and now you've got this gooey stuff. So talking about concentration, your bud, like back in the day when you got pot, it was about 3% THC. And again, a lot of that was because you had everything there, not just the right buds. Today, your buds are between 10 and 20% THC, so much stronger than back in the day. That's kind of important. We'll talk about that in terms of addiction and stuff. Now, if you take that bud, which is 10%, and you rub the trichomes off, you're going to get hash that's about 40% THC. If you've got a 20% bulb, then it's going to be about 60 or 70% THC. So hash is much more concentrated than regular bud because you've concentrated it by taking those trichomes off. Now, if that's not enough for you, you can take this concentrated cannabis product and then extract it. So extraction means you dissolve it in some kind of a solvent and you get rid of things that are not soluble in that solvent, and then you dry the solvent off, and now you've got a concentrated product of THC. So you can extract this with alcohol, with liquid CO2, with butane. You can take your pot and they do a cold sieving or something where they put it in ice water and the trichomes come off. But anyway, once you do that, you get a hash oil, which is like 90% THC. So those are just the different forms you can get. Typically, it's going to be your bud, your hash, or your hash oil. And how might one ingest this if one wanted to ingest this? Well, I'm glad you asked. Oh, here's another thing. So again, if you're just getting it from your local dealer guy, you're going to get whatever it is he has. But if you're in a state where you've got a legal retail market, you could go in there and just decide what you want. And I just love the names of these things. Sensei Star, Cincy, Blue Dream, Sour Diesel, LSD, Train Wreck, Afghan Kush. So a lot of different strains of it. And how these things are going to differ is by concentration of THC, for one thing. That'll make a big difference. Concentration of CBD. CBD will affect the THC effect. And then like all the other cannabinoids that are in there that nobody knows anything about. There's really been very little put into it. Look at this Afghan Kush, 0% THC, 0% CBD, 0% Delta-9. So I'm not sure why anybody would buy that. Just got legalized in New Jersey. Woohoo! Okay, I think it's been legal in Vermont for about 2 or 3 years now, but there isn't a retail market. You have to get some seeds and grow it yourself. You're allowed to have 2 adult plants and 4 juvenile plants at any one time. But they just, I think, recently passed a retail law, so there will be stores over here eventually. What's it like in New York State? Does anybody know? I know medicinal is legal, but I don't think
Medicinal only.
Medicinal only. Okay. So anyway, but you can see the concentrations here of THC in different strains can vary quite a bit. And like I said, back in the day, if you got pot, it'd be about 3% THC. Now today it's over 20%. So let's watch this guy, Louis C.K. I know he's been canceled because he did something stupid, but he's still pretty funny. Let's watch this because I don't know if I should admit this, but I had an experience similar to this at one time in my life. It's a long time ago when I was younger. I wasn't young, I was younger. Okay.
I can't smoke pot because it's the same thing. I'm too old for it. Sometimes young people come up to me after shows. Hey, do you want to smoke some pot? I'm like, can I get my portion to smoke without you alone later? Because I don't want to stand in a parking lot with some 20-year-olds. Last time I got high, I was in Kansas City, and I got high because I was in Kansas City, and it was shitty. So after the show, so these kids that worked at the club, they're like, you want to smoke some pot? I'm like, yes. So I'm standing in a parking lot with these kids, like 20 years old, and we're smoking a joint. And I'm taking huge hits because I had no idea. I didn't know they've been working on this shit like it's the cure for cancer. I didn't understand the fucking technology that's gone into making pot so powerful. Because when I was a kid, you could just smoke a joint for a while. Now you take 2 hits and you go insane. It's not doable anymore. And I was taking big hits, like big 1970s jean jacket bad company hits. Here comes Jesters, 1, 2, 3. It's all part of my fantasy. I'm like, yeah. And even the kid with the wooden hole of no ear, the absence of flesh in his ear with the wood, I don't know what that is. Even he was like, "That you should be careful. That's a lot of pot. That's very strong marijuana." Yeah, that's fine. Running with the devil, just fucking. And in about 10 seconds, everything just. And I'm like, oh shit. This is an ordeal now. I'm not going to feel okay for a very long time. And everybody's just standing around and talking, and I'm hoping, like I'm really hoping that I look like this. But I'm pretty sure that I was just scanning insanely. I was actually counting, like, look at her for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Switch to him. 5, 4, 3, 2. Randomize. Don't go the same direction. 5, 4, 3. Nod your head. That looks like you're listening if you nod your head. And at one point I realized I need to get out of here because the air is hitting my arm weirdly and they can tell. They totally know that I'm not handling the way air is touching my arm right now. Why am I doing that with my hand? That's weird to do that with your hand. Nobody stands like this. Nobody stands like this. Just fucking, no, that's weird too. That's crazy. Just, shit. I gotta go. But I didn't know how to leave because I had this dilemma. We're all standing in a perfect circle facing each other. And I thought it's gonna be insane if I just I'm one person with my back now. Do I just back away like this and hope that they fill in? And then I thought, no, say something. Say something out loud to them that smooths the transition of you leaving. Okay, what do I say? Pick a thing to say. Goodbye. That's a nightmare. That's just goodbye. That's just noises. Finally, I walked away and I said, I'm leaving! I know it was that bad because they all went, oh, shit, okay. Whoa. Like, I'll never see those people again as long as I live. And then I had to get in the car. I forgot that I had rented a car, and I have to drive back to the hotel. And I'm driving on this highway in Missouri. And at one point I realized, I think it's been about 25 minutes since I looked out the front window of this car. I've just been dealing with shit directly in. Oh, shit. There's a whole spectrum of responsibility out here. I'm supposed to take part in this. And then at one point, I remember I was at a drive-thru, and I was terrified because there's a lady sticking her head out a window, and she's mad. She's going, sir, sir. And I just kept saying, I don't know. I had the window closed. I had no fucking idea. What part of the transaction did I pay yet? Have I ordered? Have I been sitting here for 40 minutes just eating at the window and I ate the paper and everything? Sir, I don't want it. I just fucking bolted. So I can't do that anymore.
Okay. I hope you people thought that was as funny as I did. But let me screen share again. Okay, so kind of so much of what's going on there. Hang on, I can't see me anymore. I'm off. More. Sorry. I can't see people anymore. Participants. Hang on. More. Nope. Oh, just when you think you know how to do a Zoom, you find out you don't know what the hell you're doing. Okay, start my video. There we are. Okay, we're back online. Okay, so anyway, a lot of what he's talking about there, we'll talk about why pot does that to you. But basically, you're just in default mode and you can't get out of default mode. So that's why, he drives up to the drive-in and short-term memory is gone and you haven't been paying attention because you're stoned and you're in default mode. And then it's like, where am I? What am I doing? And time gets dragged out. So it's like I've been sitting here for 5 seconds or 5 minutes. I don't know what's going on. Pretty funny. But again, it's like every time I see this slide, I think of him saying, they've been working on this shit like it's the cure for cancer. It's kind of true. I mean, how much work did they do to get all these different strains with all these different, this one takes you up and this one takes you over and then this one gets you back over to this place and then this strain will bring you down in here. It's ridiculous. Anyway, and here's how you would ingest it. So we're into absorption of our pharmacokinetic section. So how do you get this into you? Most people are going to smoke it. Now, I would advise against smoking. Whenever you burn something, you create incomplete combustion products. That's what the smoke is. It's basically, if you burn something completely, you get CO2 and H2O, but you're not burning it completely. So you get these polyaromatic hydrocarbons, they're called. And so those things are cancerous. So whenever you smoke something, you're taking cancer-causing chemicals in your body. So, again, a lot of people ask, well, what's worse, smoking pot or smoking cigarettes? I think in terms of the smoke itself, pot is worse. But in terms of, having 2 hits at night versus smoking 2 packs a day, that's your difference between smoking cigarettes and smoking pot. But okay, so your THC then, hang on, I'm looking at my notes. So smoking then, if you inhale and hold, you'll get about 30% of the THC out of that, and then you exhale the rest. And that's the way most people do it. Now your bong, that's another an area of misinformation. I had a student once tell me that his high school teacher told him that if you smoke pot through the bong, the water magically filters out all the bad things and only lets the good things through. Yeah, no, that's not what it does. What the bong is doing is cooling that smoke down. So hopefully you've all had freshman chemistry. So Charles' law and Boyle's law, a vapor, when it cools down, will condense. So if you're smoking in a bong, you're cooling that smoke down, so it's easier to get down your throat, but also it's more concentrated. So a bong hit is a lot more per lungful, or per 2 lungfuls, depending on how you smoke. Okay. So a better way, in my humble, is by vaping. Now this is old school vaping. This thing down here, this is like a little heat thing, and it would have a balloon on top of it, and you put your little pot there, and you heat it, and you let the balloon fill up, and then you breathe out of the balloon. That technology came out when they first started making medical marijuana, so they would have you use it that way. Today you get a little handheld device that you can actually put your marijuana into, and it heats it up, and you can vape it that way. And that's probably the best way to do it. You've got these vaping pens you can get, and they can be dangerous. I'm not 100% on the technology here, but they put other chemicals in there to keep the THC suspended or something, and they can do really bad things to your lungs, especially if you get it from like some clandestine lab that didn't know what they were doing. I think the certified labs are better, but if this is where a lot of people died some years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, because this one clandestine lab was making these vaping pens, and they added, I believe, vitamin E to it or something, and that ended up really screwing up people's lungs, and they were dying from it. So personally, I wouldn't do this unless I was really sure what I was doing, but I probably would not do this. Probably the best way of all to take this drug. Well, anyway, backing up, vaping. So when you take it this way, you're going to peak in about 5 or 10 minutes. So the time scale is reasonable. And it will usually last about 2 hours before it starts to drop in your brain. Safest way to eat it or to take it, of course, is edibles. So I get a kick out of this too. Like in the places where the retail market is open, I mean, the things they come up with are just friggin' ridiculous. Pot tarts, Captain Chronic. Here's a drink, some chocolate. You can get it in any kind of form. Basically, they heat it to turn it into THC, and then they measure the dose, so you know how much you're going to be getting with each thing. And that's why a retail market helps you to regulate your dose. If you're making it yourself or getting some edible from some friend, you never know how much is in it, and that can be dangerous too. So the thing about oral administration is it only 10% of it will be bioavailable. And the reason for that is you've got a first pass effect. So of the THC you swallow, 10% of it will get into your bloodstream. 10% will be converted into 11-hydroxy-THC, which is actually more potent than regular old THC. And then 80% of it will be converted into carboxy-THC, which, as we said earlier, is polar, and therefore the kidneys just get rid of it. And because of this, because it's only really 20% of it gets into your system because of the 11-hydroxy, you usually eat a lot more than you would smoke. You could smoke in small quantities, whereas to eat it, you're going to need more. And oral absorption, we've talked about this before. You never know when it's going to hit you. It's my next slide, I believe. Oops. Okay, so here's inhalation. Right, comes on fast, and now you're at the rate of it being metabolized, and it comes down slow. Oral administration takes longer for it to peak, and the peak is lower, and then it goes out longer. So inhalation comes on faster but lasts shorter. Oral takes longer to come on, but then lasts longer. And this is a classic. This is your classic oral cannabis story. It's like people eat it and they don't know what dose they're taking, especially if it's the first time they're doing it and someone made brownies. Here you go, have a brownie. Oh, okay. You eat this brownie and, an hour later, nothing's happening. Like, Jesus, wasn't there a pot in that? And then 15 minutes later, it's like, like the whole world just shifts. So I think I told you that story of the party I was at where someone had some brownies, and it just devastated the party because people ate a second one, and that was not a good thing to do. So that's the problem with anything that's oral. It's going to take a lot longer, and so you need to know your dose going in, because if you're trying to gauge your dose by how you feel, you're going to be in big trouble. Okay, THC is distributed via a two-compartment model. Okay, we talked about this in chapter 1. So you've got your aqueous compartment, which is your blood and your muscles, and anything with a lot of cytoplasm is your water compartment. And then lipid compartment is your fat stores, but also all cell membranes, and your brain is mostly cell membranes, so your brain's very fatty. So when you when this gets into your blood, it will partition into your brain and you'll have the effect. And then as it slowly leaches out of your brain, it will be metabolized and eliminated. So you get a longer half-life of detection for this reason. So as that THC is coming out of your brain and other fatty compartments, your liver will convert into carboxy THC, and then it'll come out in the liver. And because it is very lipid soluble, it will be stored at low levels in your lipid for a long period of time. So it can be detected a long time after you've used it. So if you're someone who has never used it before, you use it once, it can probably be detected in your urine a week later because it's been stored as THC in your fat, comes out, it gets converted, and as it's coming out, it's being converted, and they're looking for that carboxy THC. So if you're a first-time user, it could last a week. If you're a chronic user, you're really massively wrecked every day, it could last at least a month because you really fill up your fat stores with THC. Also, if you're an obese person, you've got more fat to store THC in. It'll be detected a lot longer because of that. So basically, think a skinny first-time user to be detected the shortest, a fat chronic user going to be detected the longest, maybe even a month and a half or more later, or someone like that. So that's kind of the conundrum for people who live in states where this is illegal, or people who have jobs in places where they don't allow it, because you may get high on a Friday night, have a good time for a couple of hours, and a week later you lose your job, and you could be drinking alcohol the night before and you wouldn't lose your job. And you could even be out drinking alcohol on the job sometimes and get away with it. But yeah, it's got a long detection half-life. Mechanism of action. All right, let's see what this is about. I'm not sure this animation is correct anymore. This is an old one, and they've been doing a lot of research on it lately. So let's see what this has to say. Oh, where's my flash? Come on, flash. Damn your eyes.
Dr. Slish? Oh, okay, there you go.
Thank you. You got to talk us old guys through this. All right, now what?
Click on,
That one?
yeah,
Okay.
no, go back.
Hello, thank you.
Welcome.
Here we go.
Before marijuana enters the system, inhibitory neurotransmitters are active in the synapse. These neurotransmitters inhibit dopamine from being released.
I'm in class.
When activated by the body's own native cannabinoid, called anandamide, cannabinoid receptors turn off the release of inhibitory neurotransmitters. Without inhibition, dopamine can be released.
Dopamine.
THC, the active chemical in marijuana, mimics anandamide and binds to cannabinoid receptors. Inhibition is turned off and dopamine is allowed to squirt into the synapse.
She makes me a little uncomfortable the way she says squirt.
Anandamide is known to be involved in removing unnecessary short-term memories. It is also responsible for slowing down movement, making us feel relaxed and calm. Unlike THC, anandamide breaks down very quickly in the body. That explains why anandamide doesn't produce a perpetual natural high.
And more's the pity. Okay. Oh, shoot. Damn it. There we go. Back up and running. Okay, so that mechanism of action, it's pretty vague. We've got a lot better explanations here in our own textbook. I know the guy who wrote the book. He's kind of a jerk, but it's a good book. Okay, so how does this thing work? Well, if you've got a drug that works, it's because you've got an endogenous site for that drug already, right? So they found this through what we call reverse pharmacology. So normal pharmacology is, you know a receptor and you want to find a way to block it, so you make a drug that blocks it. This went the other way. They knew there was a drug that worked. Now we have to find the receptor that affects it. So they kind of went backwards, and then they found out, oh yeah, there's two different kinds of receptor for this in the body. There's a CB1 receptor and a CB2 receptor. Well, what activates it? And then it took a long time for them to find the endogenous neurotransmitters that activate this, because they have such a short half-life. They get broken down really easily. So we've got two different endogenous activators of the CB1 receptor and CB2 receptor. And there's anandamide, which is the first one that was found. And usually when they talk about endogenous cannabinoids, this name comes up. But this is less common than this one. This is probably more, I'm sorry. This is wrong. There. This is the more common neurotransmitter in your brain for these receptors, 2-AG, 2-arachidonyl glycerol. So arachidonic acid is a 20-carbon fatty acid chain. You can see it there, right? That's arachidonic acid. It's got 4 double bonds. So that is a very common constituent of your plasma membranes. It's usually, I believe, the second fatty acid in the chain of the fatty acid chain, or maybe the first. So if you look at, this looks like it's the second. So if you look at a phospholipid is glycerol, 1, 2, 3 carbons, and you've got fatty acid chains on 2 of those carbons, and then a polar head group on the 3rd one. So this could have been inositol, could have been phosphatidylinositol or serine or something. But anyway, you've got this one fatty acid chain here. So one enzyme comes and takes this fatty acid off. Another enzyme comes and cuts the polar head group off. And now you've got 2-AG. And that's kind of how it's made. It's made on the fly. So when your brain decides it needs a little 2-AG, enzymes turn on and it breaks this down and releases it. So it's very different from other neurotransmitters, because we've always said neurotransmitters are synthesized inside a vesicle and stored in the vesicle, and then you get the vesicle to fuse with the presynaptic membrane and the neurotransmitters release. This is totally different. For one thing, well, let's see, is it the next? No, it's not the next slide. But we'll talk about it more later, but basically it's being synthesized in the postsynaptic membrane as it's needed and released and has effect on the presynaptic membrane. So it's going in the reverse direction. It's being made on the fly. And what else? I guess those are the big things that are different about this versus other neurotransmitters. Okay, but in terms of the endogenous situation, you've got CB1 receptors and CB2 receptors. So CB1 receptors are the ones that THC activates, and they're mainly in the brain. So you've got them in the cerebral cortex, which is going to affect sensory awareness and cognition, in the limbic system for emotional processing, in the hippocampus for short-term memory, in the basal ganglia and the cerebellum or balance and timing. So all these things are going to come into play with THC. CB2 receptors, on the other hand, are mainly in the leukocytes, which are, white blood cells that are involved in inflammation, and also microglia in the brain. So leukocyte, this is a lot of, I don't talk much about CBD, but a lot of the effects you get of CBD is because of their effects on leukocytes, because they're going to inhibit leukocyte function. So leukocytes cause inflammation, and these things will inhibit that. So that's a lot of the relief from pain you get with CBD, because it blocks that inflammation response. You also have CB1 receptors that are associated with opiate receptors that kind of magnify the effect of opiates. So the THC can also inhibit pain. But a lot of times why people are using medical marijuana is for pain. This is part of it. And then your CB1 receptors, which are not activated by CBD, but so THC can have some pain effects as well. Oh, okay. So this is what I want to talk about. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to hopefully go through it slowly because this is kind of complicated and interesting. So our normal neurotransmission. So let me just make this bigger and bigger. Oh, man. Okay, so normal transmission is over here. So this is a glutamate synapse. So this is the presynaptic axon bulb, and it releases glutamate. And here's your postsynaptic membrane, which is probably a dendrite or something, and it's got receptors here for glutamate. And so when your action potential comes down here, the Voltsch-Meter calcium channel opens, calcium comes in. These vesicles fuse with the membrane and glutamate gets released. And that activates these receptors, which are glutamate receptors, which means they're sodium channels, so you get stimulation of the postsynaptic membrane. So that's just normal neurotransmission. So on some neurons, when you stimulate with glutamate, you then activate these two enzymes. So this is phosphorylinositol, and this will take the inositol off, and then this will take one of those fatty acids off of it, and boom, you're left with 2-AG. So now you've got this cannabinoid neurotransmitter diffuses backwards across the synapse to affect presynaptic receptors. So your CB1 receptors are on the axon of the previous neuron. And it does 3 different things. I only have 2 of them drawn here because it just got too crazy to put it all in. But it does 3 things. One thing it does is inhibit the production of cyclic AMP. So you remember previously, cyclic AMP increases release of neurotransmitters. That's what amphetamines were doing, increasing cyclic AMP, and your neurotransmitter is being dumped out. So CB1 receptor is going to do the opposite. It's going to block cyclic AMP, so there's less cyclic AMP being made, less protein kinase A activation, less phosphorylations of your Voltsch-Meter calcium channel. CB1 receptor is also going to activate a G protein that's going to directly inhibit that Voltsch-Meter calcium channel. And thirdly, which is not here on this slide, it will activate a potassium channel, which is going to hyperpolarize a little bit the presynaptic membrane. So every depolarization gets you less activation of calcium channels. So basically 3 different mechanisms CB1 receptors are using to inhibit calcium coming in. And when you inhibit calcium entry, you get less glutamate release. So, and then this 2-AG will eventually be taken back up by a pump on the postsynaptic membrane and broken down into arachidonic acid, and then it just gets recycled and reused. Okay, so basically to go over again, you've got normal neurotransmission over here where glutamate's being released and causing stimulation, but that can cause an activation of these enzymes, which are going to convert PI into 2-AG. 2-AG then diffuses across the membrane, activates CB1, which inhibits the Voltsch-Meter calcium channel, inhibiting glutamate release. And then it will get taken back up by the presynaptic side and broken down. So what 2-AG is doing then is modulating the glutamate release. So we're not going to totally block it. Okay, we're not like shutting off this synapse. What we're doing is decreasing it a little bit, attenuating it, okay, bringing it down a little bit. And that's kind of the theme here of your endogenous cannabinoids. It's going to modulate activity in the brain. It's not turning anything on or off. It's just kind of slowing things down, changing them a little bit. So I've got a chat question here. What is the green receptor again? Oh, so the green thing is not a receptor. It's adenyl cyclase. So this is what produces cyclic AMP from ATP. So your CB1 receptor is blocking adenyl cyclase, causing a decrease in cyclic AMP. Escape, escape, escape. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. Okay, so, all right, so that's it for kind of the basics. I don't think I want to go any further, else I won't have anything to talk about Wednesday. So Wednesday, we're going to talk about what this actually does in the brain, what 2-AG is being used for in the brain, and then we'll talk about what happens when THC comes on the scene. And we're going to see like 2-AG is kind of like making things flow better, making your motions smoother, making things work really nicely. And then THC is just going to be like, bam, activating everything all at once and really changing the way you perceive things. And, you know, there's some kind of an online magazine. I'll have to find out and send you the link. But this woman from communications interviewed me last week about all this THC stuff. She said she was writing a column about it in this week's issue of some online magazine. So I'll find out what that is and I'll send you the link because I'm sure I said some intelligent things last week. I don't remember it all, but I'm sure it was smart. That might be interesting. And that's about it. Any questions, comments? Can I see your faces again real quick? How many people are here? 23. Brian Jacobson. Who the hell are you? Are you in this class?
Yeah, I just got here. Been a while.
You haven't said a goddamn thing all semester. Okay, Sean Reeser's here. Now there's a surprise. He didn't say anything all day, and that's a surprise. He's
I
usually
can change that. I can start asking some questions. Keep
Oh.
everyone here at like another half hour.
Lay it on me, mister.
Actually, I don't have any today.
We'll bring him Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? So Wednesday we'll get into more details about how this changes function in the brain normally and what happens with higher amounts. Okay?
Thank you.
We all good? Okay. We'll see you again Wednesday. Love you guys.